All right, Mr. Mayor, you're all set.
Great, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the April 18th meeting for the City Council of Burlingame. I hope everybody filed their taxes and everybody's ready to go. So with that, we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. I have asked our city librarian, Brad McCulley, to do the honors.
If everybody could stand, please. Put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. McCulley. And with that, Madam City Clerk, if we could do the roll call.
Councilmember O'Brien?
Here.
Councilmember Beach?
Here.
Councilmember Coulson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Here.
Mayor Ortiz?
Here. And with that, we will go to a report from our closed session, Mr. City Attorney.
There was no reportable action. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And with that, we'll go on to upcoming events. And I got a few from our sustainability coordinator. So let me read these to you. Upcoming landscaping class on creating a low maintenance yard will be on April 27th from 7 to 8 on Zoom via Box's website for more information and to register. Visit Box's website for more information and register. City of Burlingame is hosting an Earth Month scavenger hunt. Take a photo by an EV charging station, bike lane, and other items to win an Earth Month goodie bag. Visit the City of Burlingame Sustainability webpage for more information. The Burlingame Library is hosting Earth Month events, including a teen bingo challenge and kids scavenger hunt. Visit the library for more information. The city is calling for art submissions for a storm drain mural project. Art will be selected and printed and placed in by key storm drains to educate the public on keeping our storm drains clean. Submissions accepted until April 30th. Visit the city sustainability webpage for more information. And that is all I have. Colleagues, does anybody have any upcoming events they'd like to share? And having none, then we will move on to presentations. And I don't believe we have any presentations. So we will move on to item number 7, which is public comments. This is public comments for items that are not on the agenda. And I will pass it on to our city clerk.
We don't have any, and I don't see anyone with their hand up, so we're good to go.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. And with that, we'll move on to item number 8, which is approval of the consent calendar. And with that, colleagues, does anybody have any items they'd like to pull? I see. Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to briefly chat about item 8E.
8E, very good. Colleagues, anyone else? And having none, then we will move it to the members of the public to see if there's any members of the public that wish to pull any items.
We didn't get any emails, and I don't see anyone with their hand up.
Very good. Now back to my colleagues. I would entertain a motion for all items number 8A, B, C, D. Oh, that's it, A, B, C, D.
So moved. And I'll second.
I have a motion by Council Member O'Brien, a second by Council Member Beach. Could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien?
Aye.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz?
Yes. Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to item number 8E, the adoption of a resolution approving a professional services agreement with CSG Consultants for the construction management and inspection services for private development projects in the amount of $1,500,000. Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have no interest in extending this meeting overly long, but I did want to pull this. This is a $1.5 million contract to have outsiders help us do the work to get these projects approved. And first, an observation, it is a sign of how much development that the city is taking on that we need this help. And I think that's to our credit that we want to make sure the process goes smoothly for all these significant developments. I guess I have a couple of questions. One, the contract to me is a little odd. It's not got to finish. It's got all of the work must be done within 2.5 years. And I suppose that it's an estimate of the amount of work that they will do, but it's kind of an odd contract. In other words, it's not a promise that all the work will get done for that amount. It might get done much sooner. And I guess I wonder how we make sure that that everyone's getting value for money here when it's a little imprecise like that, if that question makes sense.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. That's a great question. And this is definitely one of those contracts that we don't do typically. And this is done to assist us with the private development construction inspection. So the projects that you see on in the staff report that are currently underway and will be underway in the next couple of years. And so their schedule will be, will dictate how much work will get done. And essentially, when these developments proceed with the construction, they will call for inspection, and we'll look at whether they are ready for inspection and do that. So staff in-house will monitor, manage the construction inspector working as part of this contract, and they will make sure they will charge us based on the hours spent for the inspection, but the inspection will be authorized by city staff to go ahead and take a look. So, and again, the estimate that you see today is we are looking at 2 years down the road, and we may not spend a big chunk of the money on the contract, and whatever we spend is reimbursable through the private development.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Director Martusa. And I'm glad to hear that last sentence. My sense of reading the staff report was that we expected most of the cost to be recoverable, but maybe not all. And that doesn't trouble me, although it did surprise me a little. I felt like if we have to hire a consultant to do private developer work, then the developer, probably ought to cover that. But I'm glad to hear that most or indeed all of that expense will be a pass-through for the city, basically.
Sure. Let me clarify that the private developers, they do their own inspection for their own purposes, for their own liability purposes, for their clients, for their contractors. But the city's inspection will be for the purposes of ensuring the city ordinances, the impacts to city infrastructure is met. So, which they don't, I assume they care about it, but we have a third-party inspection making sure all compliances are ensured for these projects for public infrastructure purposes.
And that's on our dime. Is that what you're saying?
That work is what is being reimbursed because that is being caused by these projects,
right,
for inspection. And there is minor costs that is such as staff involvement through the coordination and all that is absorbed by the city's budget, which is minor.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Councilman Coulson, just one last quick question, which is I'm pleased to see that staff says, they've been doing great work. We expect them to keep doing great work. But just briefly, how will you check quality of the work in terms of the developer? In other words, there have been times when cities outsource work to third parties, and that third party is incredibly slow. And the city sort of loses track of that because the city's not doing the work, and yet the developer becomes frustrated. So do we have even an informal way of sort of checking to see that the developers are getting their own value for money from this work?
Definitely. From in the recent past, we have heard from developers when any inspection or plan checking gets delayed, and we hear from them, and I hear from them when there is even a week delay. for any of their projects. And then staff, I get to it and figure out what is causing the delay and where the issues are. And there are multiple contractors working on any of these large projects. So it's difficult to make sure everything is done on time because it's all interconnected and more dependent on their subcontractor than the city. And sometimes they themselves are not aware. Left hand is not aware of the right hand, what right hand is doing, and where we are coordinating. So many of these projects are, especially the one listed on Airport Boulevard and 1499 Bayshore Highway. They are large projects. It's going
Very
to consume the city.
complicated. Very complicated. I'm completely in favor of having outside help. So these were just questions I had about the structure, not about the goal of the work. Thank you, Mr. Martusa.
You're welcome.
And Councilmember Colson, if I might, just to kind of a follow-up to this question, Mr. Martusa, can you comment on our past experience with CSG?
CSG has done a great job for the city for the last several years. One of their example is the Burlingame Point development. It's a massive project that was done in the city. There's no other big project in the city, no other bigger project in the city than the Burlingame Point project. And this CSG firm, they're locally, they're a local firm, and they have a good knowledge of the city requirements and all that. The other project that they have done for the city was the Highland Avenue Garage. They've been assisting the city in with the construction of the inspection of that as well.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Colson.
So my only comment was just coincidentally this weekend, I happened to be somewhere and ran into just a third-party person who is doing development work, big development work throughout many Bay Area counties. And when they found out I was from the Burlingame City Council, they actually gave a big shout out to our staff and just said, really, probably the best city that they've ever worked with in the Bay Area, and very efficient and, responsive and, really a pleasure to work with. So I just, since this was pulled off the agenda, I thought I would just share that, that comment with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pass it on to staff.
Thank you. Yeah, I have heard that also on many occasions. So thank you, Councilmember Colson. That's very nice. Colleagues, any other questions? If not, then we can open it to the public to see if any members of the public have any comments on this item.
Don't have any emails and I don't see any hands up.
If there are none, then Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve item 8E.
Thank
I'll
you,
second.
Vice Mayor.
Second it.
And thank you, Councilmember Colson. So we have a motion by Vice Mayor Brownrigg, second by Councilmember Colson. Please have a roll call.
Councilmember O'Brien. Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Councilmember Colson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes. Thank you. With that, we're moving to item number 9A, which is an introduction of an ordinance adopting a military equipment use policy and adding the policy to the Burlingame Police Department policy manual. I take it the chief will guide us through this one, or no? It's city attorney.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll take it on, and Chief Matucci will back me up. I've got a quick PowerPoint deck for you, so let me set that up.
Yeah, you were busy on your return.
Let's see. Apologies for this. All right, can you see my screen? All right, thank you. And all right, so good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'll be presenting tonight on a ordinance adopting a military equipment use policy pursuant to AB 481. As I said, I'm going to be providing the main presentation, but Chief Matucci is here to also help if you have any technical questions about the military equipment that we'll be talking about. So this is just the recommended procedure for the evening. that after you receive the staff report and ask any questions, that you request the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance and then by motion waive any further reading and introduce it. We then recommend that you conduct a public hearing, and after considering the ordinance, consider a motion to determine whether or not to bring the ordinance back for second reading. So AB 481, this statute came into effect in January 1 of this year, and it requires that a law enforcement agency that seeks funding for or acquires or deploys military equipment must first obtain approval from its governing board via adoption of a military equipment use policy to authorize those actions to either fund, acquire, or use that military equipment. The statute also requires that if any military equipment is going to be used by another law enforcement agency operating within the territorial bounds of the city, that that agency's military equipment must also be included in the military equipment use policy. So what does that mean for Burlingame? So that means that any equipment, any military equipment that is going to be funded or used or deployed by the Burlingame Police Department must be covered by the military equipment use policy. And any other local law enforcement agency that operates military equipment within the city boundaries must also be covered by our policy. City of Burlingame is a member of the North County Regional SWAT team, which also will deploy military equipment that's as defined under the ordinance. And the SWAT team it's possible that the SWAT team may deploy their military equipment within the city boundaries. And so their equipment would also be covered by our policy as well. AB 481 requires that by May 1st of this year, the City Council start the process of approving a military equipment use policy. That policy has to be adopted by ordinance at a regular meeting of the City Council via a public hearing. And so that's why we're having this particular agenda item before you tonight. The council must adopt the policy within 180 days after tonight, after initial submission. And if the council doesn't adopt it by that 180-day deadline, then the police department cannot deploy its military equipment until the policy has been adopted. The statute, AB 481, also requires that a draft of the policy must have been posted on the police department's website for at least 30 days prior to the public hearing, and staff has done that. So we had posted the draft of the policy on the website 30 days prior to tonight. Finally, AB 481 requires that the military equipment use policy be reviewed and reauthorized annually by the City Council. And I'll get into the annual review in just a couple slides. So the military equipment that is deployed by Burlingame PD, first of all, I'll say that the Burlingame Police Department does not possess tactical equipment that's been obtained from the military, nor does it possess any equipment that is designed for military use. Military equipment as defined under AB 481 includes a variety of equipment that was outlined in your staff report, about 15 categories. It includes things like drones, firearms and munitions over 50 caliber or greater, and less than lethal equipment. For the Burlingame Police Department, the type of equipment that would be covered by AB 481 is shown here on this slide. And then moving on to North County SWAT. Again, this is not equipment that is owned by Burlingame PD, but it is equipment that is owned by the SWAT team that in the event of an incident may be deployed within the city and therefore would be covered by our military equipment use policy. So AB 481 requires that in order to adopt the military equipment use policy, the council must make certain findings. And those findings are outlined here on the slide. Staff believes that those findings can be made. Regarding the second bullet point here regarding public welfare, safety, and civil rights and liberties, I'll note that the policy describes the purpose and the use of each type of military equipment, the funding, the fiscal impacts of it, the standards of use, and the training that's required. So it provides a certain amount of transparency and openness as to what the equipment is, what it's used for, how to train on it, what the fiscal impacts are. Regarding the third bullet point, in this case, for this cycle, the police department is not requesting purchase of new equipment, but merely asking to deploy equipment that it currently has. And then regarding the last bullet point, this is the first year of the policy, so there is no baseline to compare against. There's no existing policy to compare against. However, when we come back to you in a year's time, we will provide an analysis of how we did in relation to what our use experience was like over the year compared to the policy if adopted by the council. So as I mentioned, there is an annual review that's required by AB 481. The annual review is required for each type of military equipment that is authorized for as long as that equipment is used. The review has to cover the topics that are listed here on the slide. And the council uses this review as a tool to determine if the military equipment that was authorized for the prior year was used as projected, as authorized. If there were issues about the use of the equipment over the past year, so if there were complaints that were lodged, or if there was corrective action that would be taken, then that information would be conveyed to the council as part of the annual review. And the council would then be able to consider whether or not there would be additional changes that would be needed for the policy going forward. AB 481 also requires that as part of the annual review process, within 30 days after releasing the annual report, the police department must hold at least one community meeting for the public. At that community meeting, the public would have the opportunity to ask questions about the annual report, about the military equipment use policy, funding or acquisition of any military equipment that would be covered by the policy. And that is my presentation. I'm available for questions, as is Chief Matucci. This slide just reiterates the recommended procedure. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Guinep. That was very nice. We now move it to my colleagues to see if anybody has questions. And I do have a question. What is a long-range acoustic device? That's the one question I have.
So that is not owned by us, but it's used for communication. It's also used to scramble communication, and it's also used to it can be used to send out signals that irritate like the ear and that to disperse crowds as well.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Okay. So I don't have any questions from colleagues, so we're going to bring it back to the city clerk to read the title of the ordinance.
An ordinance of the city of Burlingame adopting a military equipment use policy and adding the policy to the Burlingame Police Department Policy Manual. CEQA determination exempt pursuant to state CEQA guidelines, section 15378 and 15061B3.
Okay.
Mr.
colleagues,
Mayor, I make a motion to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Councilmember Beach and a second by Councilmember O'Brien. Could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien.
Aye.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Councilmember Coulson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes, and with that, we'll move on to any other comments, colleagues, before we open it to the public? And if not, we'll open it to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
I don't have any emails and I don't see anyone with their hand up.
Great, so then we just,
One hand up, sorry. I have Barb Atwell, who I will unmute now.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. I am representing the American Friends Service Committee. I've been working on the use policy report that was just published last week. I just wanted to thank you so much for having this meeting early. I know that reading your policy, the military equipment coordinator, is an excellent start. And I love the fact that they're going to prepare the public for questions regarding the use of equipment. What I've seen so far are a couple missing items. One of them is that the assault rifles are not standard issue, and so they require use policies. Also, proposed policies need to define the actual use of that equipment, not just who can use it. And also it needs to include the circumstances in which they are used. There are a lot of details in the AFSC report that I'd love to point to you, but I feel like there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Thank you.
great, thank you for that. And we welcome an email if you have more detail you wish to share. Madam City Clerk, do we have any other public comment?
That is it.
Then I will bring it back to my colleagues for any final comments or for a motion to bring back the ordinance.
Motion to bring back the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion by Council Member Colson and a second by Vice Mayor Brownrigg. Madam City Clerk, if we could have a roll call.
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Hand up.
Council Member Beach.
No, thank you. And I do appreciate staff's work on this. I mean, I think the transparency and the ability to have oversight on this equipment is a laudable thing. And it's state law, but I really appreciate the annual review. So we'll get to see how these are the equipment's deployed and used. And if there's complaints, cost acquisition, all that is good transparency, good governance. I'm wondering if staff has any comments on the public comment, whether or not there needs to be further detail on those items, or is that up to the individual jurisdiction? And if staff has any input on that to be considered as we move forward, or if that's something that we review at the year's end. Thanks for your thoughts.
Mr. City Attorney, if you would like to comment on
Sure.
that.
Sure. I appreciate the input from the member of the public. I believe that the policy can be adopted as is, but I would certainly welcome the thoughts and comments from members of the public, and would certainly invite the member of the public to provide her thoughts to the city clerk, which could be passed on to me. And if we need to make any changes, we can certainly do that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll go back to the motion that's on the table unless somebody has any final comments. So back to the motion. I believe it was a motion by Councilmember Colson and a second by Vice Mayor Brownrigg. If we could just have a roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Aye.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Councilmember Colson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Yes, thank you all. And we're now moving to staff reports and communications, and we have item 10A, adoption of the resolution directing staff to fly the pride flag throughout the month of June at City Hall. Madam City Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Ortiz, members of the council. This is our feel-good item for the night. We've long recognized June as Pride Month, but it wasn't until last year that we actually flew the pride flag. We flew the Progress Pride flag on the City Hall flagpole. That was our first time, and we actually had a lovely little ceremony that a number of you were able to attend. We had not flown the flag for quite a long time because we were worried about opening up the public forum and opening our flagpole to everyone. And then we had a very clever assistant city attorney who found out that we actually could go ahead and fly whatever flag we wanted, as long as it was city speech and not, public speech for anybody else. And so Our Assistant City Attorney, Scott Spansell, drafted a policy that you adopted back in February. And that resolution and outdoor flagpole display policy are part of your packet tonight. And we have to go through a process. So a request to fly a commemorative or ceremonial flag must be made by at least 2 city council members during a duly noticed meeting by the city council, and the request will be voted on by the city council at a later date. And then all requests to fly a commemorative or ceremonial flag must receive an affirmative vote of at least 4 city council members to be approved. And so at your last meeting on April 4th, Councilmember Beach requested that the city fly the Progress Pride flag during the month of June, which is Pride Month. And Mayor Ortiz seconded that request. And so that kicked in this process of bringing forward a request to fly a ceremonial flag. And so when that future agenda item request was made, I suggested that we bring to you a resolution directing that we fly the Progress Pride flag or whatever any subsequent Pride flags may be. The flag gets redone periodically with different stripes, which all have different meanings. So whatever the Pride flag of the year is, hoping that we will fly that every year and that you will just adopt a resolution so that we don't have to go through this process every year, and you'll just say, this is what we're going to do, for the foreseeable future. So that's the resolution before you. And along with the flagpole display policy for anybody who's interested, we do have a Progress Pride flag. So once June 1st hits, we'll be ready to send that up our flagpole at City Hall if the City Council approves this resolution by a vote of at least 4 City Council members. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Colleagues, any questions for our city manager? And having none, then I will open it up for the members of the public to comment. Or so, Madam City Clerk, if you could take it over.
I don't have any emails and I don't see any hands up. So I think we're good to go.
Very good. So I'll bring it back to colleagues. Any final comments, or I would entertain a motion to approve this. So any
Motion to approve the flag policy.
actually is motion to approve the pride flag
Okay.
to fly in the month of June. So that's your
Okay,
motion.
sorry. Motion to approve, sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Motion to approve the flag, the pride flag to fly in the month of June.
Second.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have a motion by Council Member Colson and a second by Vice Mayor Brownrigg. Can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember O'Brien.
Aye.
Councilmember Beach.
Yes.
Councilmember Colson.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes.
Mayor Ortiz.
Aye. And with that, the motion passes unanimously. And so we got the 4 votes. And so we will be flying the pride flag. That's great news. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And we're moving on to item number 11, council committee and activity reports and announcements. Colleagues, there's your forum. Anybody have any announcements? Having none, then we will move on to item number 12, which is future agenda items. So colleagues, once again, and having none, then we will move on to acknowledgements, the agendas, packets, and meeting minutes for the Planning Commission, Traffic Safety and Parking Commission, Beautification Commission, Parks and Recreation Commission, and the Library Board of Trustees are available online at www.burlingame.org. And with that, colleagues, does anybody have anybody who they would like to adjourn in their memory? And having none, then we are adjourned. And thank you very much. Good night.
Go Warriors.